thought that there was.
Muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. There's a survey that should have popped up as soon as you logged in. Enable. Admit all. And whenever somebody pops in, go ahead and admit them. Okay, time is 6:02. Good evening, everybody. My name is Anarita Bigay. I am a community outreach specialist for the University of Arizona's Cooperative Extension program. I work for a program called Arizona Health Zone. And what we do is we try to educate everybody about healthy living options. And one of those healthy living options is gardening. I want to thank the Navajo Nation Library right now, who is hosting this on their Facebook Live platform, so that this class can get to everybody across the Navajo Nation. There's a few key people that you guys want to say hello to. I'm going to go ahead, and to my right over here, we have Alma.
Hello, my name is Yá'át'ééh from Navajo Nation Library. I'm the library assistant there. So thank you for attending the C2 supper. And I hope you have fun.
And then with Holly, go ahead and introduce yourself now.
Hi, I'm Holly Winters from Apache County Cooperative Extension Office. Happy to be here with you, Anna.
Thank you, Holly. All right, we're going to go ahead and get this show on the road. We're going to try to get this done as quickly as possible. Please put your questions in chat. Feel free to unmute yourself. We'll go ahead and have Holly and Alma keep track of all your questions, and I'll try to answer them in a timely manner. We should be here close to about 6:30 with open questions and everything. If we need to go longer, let me know, okay? Go ahead and next slide. So we are got it? Okay. All right. So a part of being a gardener is just making sure that you're taking care of your plants. First and foremost, us being Navajo here on the Navajo Nation, gardening is something that we've always done from the beginning of time. We are people that have cultivated our own food for a very long time, put it away for winter. It's something that we have as tradition. We have always brought our families around food and processing food too as well. So a lot of our ancestors, we really talk about our fields, we talk about our birthday parties, our cookouts. It's something that really brings us together, and gardening is one of those things that we need to start practicing every day. Garden, the field, those are our original classrooms. And so when we're talking about growing our own food and we're talking about creating our own food, we're actually creating that classroom for our families and for our children to be able to come together. And part of your job as a gardener is understanding the science behind how your plant grows, how you put your seed into the ground, and then also making sure that it comes to a long, fruitful life at the end so that you're consuming it. So just keep that in mind as we go forward from here to there. Right here, what we're seeing on a screen is just like the basics, okay? Your job as a gardener is simple. It's simple to understand the needs of your plants and to provide them. What your plants really need, they need sunlight, they need water, they need air, and they need nutrients in their soil. And they need to be in the right amounts, and they need to be planted in the right amount of time, okay? This course is going to teach you how to give those plants what they need so that they can grow successfully. Plants are like babies, okay? They can't get up and go and get something to drink. They can't tell anybody if there's too much sunlight, if they're too hot, if they're going to burn. They can't voice those opinions to you. So it's really important that you take gardening as a caretaker and make sure that you're paying attention to your plant, what they look like, how they feel like, what the soil feels like. And then also you want to make sure that you're paying attention and learning as you go along. Gardening is not something that is easy for you to learn in one time. It's a long process. It's a learning process every day and every year. Something new always pops up, a new challenge pops up. So don't get discouraged. Okay. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing now on your screen is a map. And we're up in the Window Rock area here, okay? You need to learn about your higher elevations and your lower elevations. All right, Window Rock is in the higher elevations. And those of you that have gotten your book, I'm pretty sure you guys have them open, right? Your links to your book. Mm-hmm. Okay. So in your book, you'll go ahead and you'll follow through and you'll see your different elevations. Can I get people to tell me exactly where they're at on the Navajo Nation or outside of the reservation?
Sanders, Arizona.
Sanders? Okay. So which zone are you in Sanders?
I believe 2.
2. So you'll see right there in this chart when your growing periods are and when you should start thinking about growing. Okay, we're over here in the Window Rock area, and we start growing around about mid-March when it starts to warm up. Burnside Junction, so you're going to be in about zone 4, zone 2. So take note of that. We have people from Forest Lake in zone 1. Okay, zone 1 is kind of the same as Window Rock, so your growing period would start around about mid-March. Orange, Texas, those of you that are joining us from out of state, you might want to find an elevation chart just like this one, probably available online somewhere to show you where exactly your elevations are. The importance of talking about your elevations here is that your climates are going to be different. We also have different microclimates here on our reservation, okay? So here in Window Rock, we live in a valley that funnels up toward Yá'át'ééh, and there's a valley and it's nice and green, and then you've got the Defiance Plateau on one side, and then you got the Yá'át'ééh Mountains on the other side. So we catch a lot of rain right before we get there. Whereas if you were in the Chinle Agency area or the Western Agency area, you don't have those mountain ranges. those mountain ranges really create your microclimates. Take for example, a canyon, okay? If you were to go to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, it would be warmer. If you were to go to the top of the canyon, it would be colder, right? And it would probably be more windier. Because of those elevation changes and those microclimates, you kind of want to start thinking about the location. Start to notice your weather patterns, okay? Which direction does your rain come from? Which direction does your wind come from? These all play key important ideas and when you're starting to plan your garden and what time you should start planting your garden. But this is a great place for you to start your higher elevations and your lower elevations. And using this information, you can go online and find as much information as you need about your specific area. Next. So in your Seed to Supper manual that I sent out, the links, did everybody get them?
Yes.
So in your Seed to Supper manual, we will be going through this every week, every Thursday, okay? Keep coming back. We do have hard copies of this booklet. I would like to make the hard copies available to those of you that attend maybe 3 or 4 more classes, and if you can come into the office to come and pick them up. You want to be able to read this, to learn it, use the pages that you think you need to be able to plan your garden. There's a table of contents in there. There's 6 chapters from beginning to end, even a chapter on how to process your foods once you get them to harvest. And then there's also a glossary where you can look up from unfamiliar words. And then there's just an appendix with some like extra contact information for master gardener classes, resources for gardening on a budget. We do have a master gardener on staff here with Arizona Healthstone that's based out of St. John's, Arizona. So if you have any questions, feel free to email any of your questions and we'll try to get back to you and make sure that you're getting all the information that you need. Next. So today, before you start planning, it's a good idea to kind of think things through so that you make the best of your garden space. So this week, today, we're going to go through the step-by-step process of creating your personal planting plan and your personal planting map. By the end of the day of today, using the workbook and the worksheets inside your workbook, you'll be able to have a plan that's going to help you move forward to planting your garden next year. Okay. And right now is the perfect time to go ahead and start planning your garden. Next slide. So when you go over to your Seed to Supper manual to about page 6, let's see. I'm trying to find my page 6. Here we go. So you want to choose the right place for your garden. It's just as important as choosing the vegetables that you grow. Like all the vegetables you need to have sunlight, they need fertilizer, they need to be well drained. But the garden has to be perfectly planned out so that you're not drowning your produce or drowning your plants, okay? So first things first, you're going to want to decide what you want to grow. Okay. So deciding what you want to grow, you want to think about what's realistic. Okay. What do you enjoy eating? What's the most cost effective for you? And what's your space as far as planting your garden? When we're talking about what you want to enjoy, what are you really going to eat? Okay, you don't want to plant something that you're not going to eat because you're not going to consume that. You're going to end up wasting water, you're going to end up wasting your time, and you're going to put it into something that you don't really want to eat. One thing I really don't like to eat is okra. I don't like okra. I would not bother to try to grow okra and waste water on okra and then try to figure out how to put it away for the winter and then waste my freezer space for it, right? So make a list of what you really enjoy eating. I like carrots, I like cabbages, I like lettuces, I like corn, I like squashes, I like radishes, I like to try different fruits and vegetables, I like tomatoes, things that I really use all the time in the kitchen for my cooking. And then what is realistic, okay? But what's realistic for you? Meaning, what can you really take care of at home? You can't really do a lemon tree, right? So you're not going to plan to plant a lemon tree. It's not realistic, not within our area up here in Wind Rock area. And it's not realistic to think that you're going to do a pineapple tree or a pineapple bush out here too in the ground. That's not very realistic. And then what's cost effective for your garden, okay? If you're hauling water, if you have a limited space, let's say you're living in an NHA housing or you're living in an apartment of some sort, what's really realistic for you, okay? If you're going to be container gardening, it's not very realistic of you to try to grow a plant that vines out 12 feet on your porch or in your walkway, okay? So what's really cost effective, what's your space limits? And we'll go over all of those pretty soon. Next. Okay, so on page 23 of your course book, there you can make a list of up to 10 vegetables that you and your family really enjoy. What are some of the foods that you guys enjoy at home? Like what's most cost effective for you? What do you guys use the most in your cooking every day? Can I get a couple of answers?
And it looks like Amanda is asking, can different zones grow only certain foods?
Yes, some zones are certain foods, some depending on where you're at, you can only grow certain foods, okay? So like lemons, oranges, those kinds of trees, you can only plant in warmer climates. And here where we're at on the Navajo Nation, our growing period is very short, especially within the region up here within Wind Rock all the way up to Wind Rock all the way up to Lukachkai area, and then furthermore, anything else, they have a little bit longer growing period. You really want to pay attention to your growing period and your climate. If you don't have that Phoenix weather, that California weather, those certain plants won't grow very well. Here in our area, we probably only have one growing period, okay? Whereas in warmer climates, you have 3 growing periods. That gives you those longer days to be able to make and produce those plants. Okay, so when we're talking about realistic, that's what we're talking about. Next slide. So in this one, this is where we're talking about realistic, your climate, okay? You're gonna want to take a look at this page, and it's going to be on page 14. It's called the Common Crop Chart. It lists a lot of the crops that grow well in our region. We're going to refer to this chart several times, and you're going to make it part of your everyday life, especially as a gardener. And when you're starting to plan this out, it's going to be a really good, useful resource for you throughout your gardening season. So don't lose these pages. There are some things that are not on here that you might be interested in growing. Those you can go ahead and Google and see where you can get them done. So let's see. Let me look at the common crop chart, sorry. So when we're looking at this common crop chart, let's take, for example, tomatoes, all right? You're going to see your planting window, your footprint, your planting method, the height of your plant, how many days to harvest, and you're going to see if it's going to be okay with some shade, if it's going to be okay with no shade, or if it has to be in full in full view of the sun, okay? You're also gonna see a section right there. It says single or succession planting. Okay, so with our region up in here, let's take for example tomatoes. It says days to harvest 60 to 85 days, and just above it you see squash from 90 to 150 days. Okay, those are probably plants that you want to get started early on, because our growing period up here is very small. So if we're starting to grow our plants in March, and we only have until the end of August, the end of September to harvest what we have, we really don't have enough time to be able to make sure that we're getting as much fruit as we want off of this plant, right? These vegetables. So what you want to do with the longer growing produce, you want to start them early on, maybe February, and then transplant them into the ground in the middle of March, beginning of June. Okay, and tomatoes, chilies, squash, those are all produce that you can plant in containers ahead of time before you transplant them into the ground. Do we have any questions on using the common crop chart?
I'm not seeing any questions, Anna, but a lot of people are interested in growing broccoli, squash, and especially tomatoes and corn and onions.
Those are all things that we can grow here in this region. Onions, some plants are frost resistant. Some plants you can get started in the winter time, like right now. Garlics and onions are some of those ones that you can start right now. If you want to start and you want to start practicing right now, you can start container planting and keeping these plants in a nice warm area. If you start your garlics right now, what will happen is in the spring, they'll start to germinate really well early on, and you'll have garlics by July, full garlic heads by July. And then also they're really good as far as cabbages in the winter. Different kinds of lettuces do well in the winter too as well. It's just depending on what variety you want to plant. We're going to go over seed selection here pretty soon. Next. So what is cost effective? You'll find this graph on page 7. It's called a scale of relative value for your garden vegetables. It's just a list of vegetables that show you what's the most valuable to the least valuable as far as expense goes. And then how expensive they are to buy in the stores. When space is limited, your value can help you to add or remove items from your list is when you're talking about your garden and what's effective for you. I really like radishes. I really like lettuces. I really like fresh herbs. Onions do really well, chard, leeks. So like the smaller vegetables, you'll have a lot of them. You'll be able to pick those throughout the entire summer, all the way until close to winter time. So I would get more bang for my buck if I was to do radishes, and radishes only take about 30 days to grow. So from the point you put the seed into the ground, you can have radishes within 30 to 40 days. And then I would be able to succession plant those and put another layer of radishes in and have that ready for another 30 days again. So you can succession plant throughout the summer, and you would be able to have radishes throughout the summer. Carrots to lettuces are the same way. You can put lettuces in the ground and only harvest the leaves that you need to consume for that day. Okay, chard, leeks, those kinds of things, you can also just pick and grow. So that would be my most relative value. I would get my more bang for my buck. Whereas with pumpkins, I will be watering it up to maybe 2 gallons per day to be able to get maybe 2 or 3 pumpkins off of one plant. And these pumpkins, they will vine for up to 12 feet sometimes, okay? So my space won't allow for me to grow pumpkins. My budget won't allow me to grow as far as water, because it does take up a lot of water, okay? So when you're thinking about that, you want to use the scale of relative value for it, okay? Next slide. Oh, we're sorry for that. Hold on. Okay, so when we're thinking about our space, we want to be able to look at the space of the plant that we pick. The footprint of our plant is something that you would see from the top down, okay? When we're looking at the footprint of our plant, when we're looking from the top down, it's the space and the footing that you see from the top down, okay? If you have a garden that's 10 by 10, and it's outside your apartment or it's outside of your NHA housing area, you don't want to plant a pumpkin that's going to take up the entire 10 by 10 area, right? So you're going to want to pick smaller plants that take up maybe a foot, a half a foot, a fourth of a foot. So you're going to find that on the common crop chart, your footprint, okay? So things that I would put in like a 10 by 10 area, I would probably most likely do things that are less than a foot each: broccolis, cabbage, cauliflowers, carrots, and I can even maximize my space by using planters, containers. I can even, you don't even have to grow just on the ground, you have to grow upwards too. So you can do tiered planting. You can make sure that you're getting as much bang for your buck in your garden as you want. Like I said, don't get yourself overwhelmed. Plan a little bit at a time. Right now is the perfect time for you to start planning your garden, especially if you're going to keep it low cost. Any question on your footprint?
Doesn't look like we have any questions right now, but if you'd like to answer the questions to our poll about gardening, that's available right now, and it will be available throughout the class.
Okay, hear me now?
I can hear you, Anna.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so footprint of your plants, you're going to plan for them at maturity when they're big enough, okay? Tomatoes get to about 2 to 3 feet depending on your varieties, so you're going to want to plan for that space, okay? So your seedlings they're going to be very tiny when they start, but like your whole healthy mature plants, they're going to be large, okay? Use your common crop chart, refer back to it, so that way you know how much space to plan for when they come to full maturity. And then this is also going to teach, gonna help you figure out how many seeds to start as in your planters inside the house, okay? What you want to be able to do is you want to save the money your money, right? So soil is really expensive right now. If you're going to be starting starts, if you're getting 1 or 2 of these bags of soil and you're going to start your tomatoes and your chilies and your squashes indoors in February, you're going to be putting in the cost of your potting soil, and then the cost of the seeds. Okay, so making sure that you understand where what your garden is capable of bringing to fruition will help you to figure out how many plants to start and help you to save money. Okay. Next slide. So with this one, this kind of shows you your plants at maturity. It starts off as a start that's about 5 inches, and it'll grow to about 36 inches. When you're growing tomatoes, depending on variety, some of them do need trellises. A trellis is a support that your tomato plant needs to be able to hold itself up. Some of these tomatoes can get up to, I don't know, like the size of a baby's head, okay, and they get really heavy. So sometimes they do need support, and you'll be able to figure that out depending on your variety and on your seed packet. So if they need a trellis, you need to make sure that you're planning for that too as well. So make sure that you have the space for it. Some varieties of tomatoes, they vine, so they'll vine upwards, and they need an entire support to be able to, they're growing upwards. Also on your seed packets, you're gonna find your planting calendars. You're gonna see information about your horizontal space requirements, so how tall they're gonna be, and how they need to be supported differently. They're going to give you instructions about your seed spacing, or the space in between your seeds, and then also your row spacing. If they're going to require thinning, or how far apart your full grown plants need to be within the rows. Okay, we're going to go forward and we're going to talk a little bit more about reading your seed packets a little bit next week. But this is one of the terms that you need to continue to think about, is your seed spacing.
And we also had some questions in regards to soil, a compost that is good, and a specific type of soil, if they should look for that to help specific types of vegetables.
Okay, what's the question? Oh, is it good to compost? Yes, it's always good to compost. If we are growing on a budget, composting is going to be your best friend. Okay, so any kind of vegetable scraps that you have, any kind of plant that you have, go ahead and start putting them aside. Right now is a good time to start composting. If you make your compost heap right now, come springtime, you'll have really good, nice, healthy compost. You can add your wood ash in there. If you're going to be doing wood ash inside your compost, make sure it doesn't have any plastics, because microplastics can grow out into your soils, and go out and leach into your soils and into your plants and come out in your fruits. Okay, so if you're going to be using ash, make sure it's a pure wood ash. Okay, specific soils that we're going to be looking for, we're going to be looking for garden soils. Okay, but you can grow in just about anything as long as you know how to recognize good, healthy soil and making sure that you're putting nutrients back into the soil every year. Building up your soil is something that we're going to talk about in our next lesson, but soil health is important, and it's going to be something that you're going to continue to do throughout the entire time you're gardening, from beginning to end. Okay, we'll go over fertilizing, we'll use composting, we'll go over different kinds of potting soils that you can do. Okay, says Noka says, I've done cold compost, but I ran out of space to keep my compost. With winter coming, how can we use compost? You can use compost bins. You can use buckets. You can use a 5-gallon or 50-gallon container. Put all your composting in there. If you are If you are covering them up in the summertime, you can also do that as well. What do you mean, Nola, by you ran out of space to keep your compost? What did you mean by that?
Hello, my name's Noka. I've done cold composting where I just kind of had a designated area for my compost, and I just left it alone and added to it when I could. And then I have a lot of compost, like I wasn't expecting to build up a big supply of it, but we were using it for like some houseplants and some gardening that we were doing in the summertime. But with winter coming, we're still composting, but I have a lot of it around and I don't know what to do with it. I'm kind of like running out of space to keep composting. Like,
You can
yeah.
build upwards. You can build upwards. You can compost upwards. Okay, so if your pile is starting to grow outwards, you can compost upwards and just take off what from the bottom what you need. There's a lot of different examples of composting we can use, or composting containers that you can create and compost upwards so that the most mature compost can come out at the bottom. So there's always methods as well. You should always be mixing in your compost every couple of weeks, every couple of days, and use it. If you don't have enough space, try using them in container gardening, or also in your raised bed gardenings too as well. You'll be able to use up a lot of your compost that way.
Michael and Micah asked, pH affects plants, and should we be measuring this?
Yes, your pH can affect your plants, depending on what kind of plant it is. We are going to go over our pH levels and our soils in the next lesson. We can do soil testing here at our office in Window Rock. You can bring in a bag of your soils. We'll test it. We'll see what you need to put into it, what you need to take out of it, depending on what you want to grow. If you want to get really technical with what you're growing and you want to make sure that your pH level is where it needs to be, you can go ahead and go that method.
Amanda asked, what type of bugs are good for Window Rock area?
The bugs that are good in our Window Rock area definitely are going to be your ladybugs.
Okay. Okay, Caroline asked, where is your office located?
Our office is located here on the Navajo Nation at the Navajo Nation Fairgrounds. Okay, we're just down on the midway where that nice beige building, right past the Department of Agriculture. Okay. Next slide. Okay, this is just a picture of what I was explaining to you earlier. It will take up and it will vine, and it can get up to 12 feet long or even longer. Take into account like your leaves for pumpkins can get bigger than your head. Okay, so if you're going to be planting something, you don't want to plant something right underneath there where the sunlight's not going to get to it unless it's a really good shade plant that you need. Okay, next one. And then your chard plants is only going to take up a little bit of space, but it'll give you lots of green, more bang for your buck. Okay. Your plant spacing. Okay, when we're talking about your plant spacing, we don't want our plants to be competing, right? We don't want our plants to be competing. Next. We don't want our plants to be competing for air. We don't want them competing for water. We want them competing for sunlight, okay? Because your plants really need that. When you're planning out your garden, you want to take into account where your sun rises and sets throughout the year, right? We're not going to try to grow something that's underneath a tree. We're not going to try to grow something underneath, a really dark shady area where there's no sunlight when we have a plant that needs full sunlight, right? Same thing when you're growing. Okay, you don't want to grow your tall plants next to something that needs full sun and sits low on the ground. Okay, so when we're looking at the sun, we're looking more southward, right? So you're going to want to grow your plants that are taller on the north end of your garden, and your smaller plants more toward the south. Okay, there's a reason why our hogans are set to capture the heat of the east in the morning, right? It's the same concept with planting. Okay, you're going to want to make sure to maximize your planting sunlight, especially during your springtime and your fall time. In the fall time, it starts to get colder faster, so the more sunlight they get, the warmer they'll be throughout throughout that fall time. And then also your airflow. Okay, when you're talking about airflow really helps your plants. It helps to keep the bugs off of them. It helps to keep the molds off of them. It helps to keep them and dry out their leaves when they need them, so that there's no spores starting to grow on them. Okay, so when we're talking airflow, you don't want a lot of airflow. Okay, I know that in Chinle Agency area, certain areas there's a lot of wind, especially in the windy season in the springtime. So try to pick a location where those winds are kind of kept to a minimum, or think about making a windbreak. Okay, if there's a problem with wind in certain areas, even the varieties of seeds and what you need to be able to have them grow in your area, you might want to look at different varieties. Okay, the varieties of seeds that you get, you kind of want to pick stuff that's already locally grown, that is adapted to the climate that we have. Okay, so wind and airflow is something that you also need to take into account. Your roots need water, air, and nutrients. All right, your roots don't need a lot of water, especially if it's like rainy season. All right, so you're not going to be trying to grow where water collects and pools. Okay, you want to be able to grow in an area where it completely is able, what you're watering is able to leach out and be able to create that perfect environment in your soil. Okay, you want to plant your plants far enough so that your leaves have enough room to reach the sunlight, the natural breezes, keep them dry, and they're getting the energy that they need. So even with your roots, you make sure that you're not planting your plants so tight to each other that they're over consuming each other and they're fighting for those nutrients. Take, for example, carrots. Okay, you're gonna need to thin them out as they go. Carrots are kind of a micro seed, so you can't really put them in the ground. And then on top of that, they don't really grow well if you put them too deep into the ground. And so what happens is when you're growing your carrots, you're putting down a lot of these tiny micro seeds, and those seeds need to be thinned out. So you're going to be pulling out seeds here and there so that at least one or two will be successful. Okay, we'll go forward now. Okay, planning for the height of your plants at maturity. Your corn is going to get tall. Your tomatoes are going to get tall. Your beans are going to need to vine some varieties, so they're going to need pole beans, so different kinds of trellises to be able to do this. When you're taking into account how tall your plants are, when you're planning them out, make sure that they're not shading out the smaller crops in your garden. Okay, so plan for the height of your plants. The taller plants, if you're in a certain area, should go on the north side if it's in a compact area. But if, let's say, you have a lot of different crosswinds and the corn is really good and sturdy and they can take on a lot of the wind, you might want to think about putting them on the west side, or the area where the winds are coming in so that they're creating a windbreak for the smaller plants, the more gentle plants that you need. It's all about planning and thinking it out a little bit at a time, okay? So container gardening versus your in-ground gardening, okay? You can grow just about anything in a container. And anything in-ground too as well, you can grow in a container. It's very similar to gardening in the ground in a container. And it needs the same amount of sunlight requirements. However, there's some significance when it comes to watering, to fertilizing, and taking care of the soil, okay? So for those of you that live in NHA or have apartments or small growing areas, just kind of take into account what your container gardening might be a little bit more expensive, because you're going to be having to fertilize a little bit more. You're going to need to make sure that you're taking care of the leaves on maybe indoors if you're growing indoors, so that you're not getting molds on your leaves. Next. The 3 R's for healthy container gardening. The right preparation, okay? We want to be able to be productive without like a lot of time out of our day. We want our plants to be able to grow and not get diseases or insect infestation. All right. Although like your container gardeners have similarities to gardening in the ground, there's some difference. So the right preparation is vital. So from the pot to the soil you put in when you're planning this out, the pot you put it in, the soil you put it in, those are going to be important because it's a closed environment. And then the location of the plant that you select, you're gonna have to figure out where you're gonna put it, okay, and if you have the right space for it. So give that careful thought to the preparation. All right. If you're going to be doing container gardening in your garden, you're going to want to make sure that the plants and varieties that you have either take full sunlight, less sunlight. Is it going to be right up next to your house? If it's indoors, is it going to be right up against a wall? If it's going to be up against the wall, will it cause damage to your wall if you water it? Is it going to have enough sunlight from the window that you have? So take into account that the right plant selection. Okay, if you're going to be doing container gardening, let's say you don't really want to do a corn indoors in a container, right? Because it's going to take up too much space, right? And you're going to need more than one plant of corn to be able to fertilize it, to be able to fruit, okay? Because you do need pollination to be able to for your corn to pollinate and fruit. Okay, so corn wouldn't be something that you would pick to put inside your house. All right, so be selective about your seeds, what kind of plants that you have. Some varieties of what are those things called? Herbs do well indoors, some of them don't. Some of them will be ready to go with just minimal sunlight. Some of them need full sunlight. So you need to really pay attention to your seed selections as far as what you're going to plant. And then the right care. Your containers, they hold a lot of water in them, depending on what your container type is, whether it's plastic, metal, wood. What we want to pick is something that drains well at the bottom, right? Because we don't want to waterlog our soil. And then also, we don't want something that's going to be dark in color that absorbs a lot of heat. Okay, so white buckets. You don't want to grow inside of tires too as well. Tires are really bad for your health. They've got a lot of chemicals in them, especially if you're going to be doing something that you're going to consume, right? That's really not good for you. So what you're planting in those containers, you want to take precautions, okay? Even if you're going to be using like railroad ties, they put chemicals on railroad ties. Those chemicals will be leaching into your soils and then into your plants, and then you consume them, okay? So be very careful on what you use. Check your pots, and if you're going to be recycling and reusing your pottings, let's say your milk jugs, those are fine, okay? But you kind of want to stay away from things that are clear, okay? Next. Like I said earlier, container gardening can be more expensive than gardening in the soil, because of the potting soil, because of the cost of the soil. Your soils in bags can go from anywhere from $8 to $10 for a 2x2 cubic foot. And then when choosing your plants, you're going to want to try to focus on plants that give you quality and not quantity and quality at the same time. So look for plants that will give you more bang for your buck. Okay, lettuces are perfect in containers. So the best choices to maximize your container gardening harvests are going to be like your cherry tomatoes, pole beans, peas, arugula, lettuce, hot peppers. And then if you want quality, definitely your herbs and your salad greens. And these are things that you can grow in containers and then grow upwards. You see a lot of different container gardens now, where you can do vertical garden growing. And you can make your own too at home if that's something that you're interested in doing. Do a lot of research on it and you'll be able to do it.
I'm still with seeds indoors. They get really and weak. And it do well when I transplant them. Absolutely.
Okay, so Caroline, you said, I started my seeds indoors on my south window sill, but they got leggy and weak and didn't do well when I transplanted them outside. So Caroline, go ahead and take yourself off of mute real quick. When you transplanted your seeds, did you weather them first?
I tried that. They didn't still do too well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then
when you chose your soil, which soil did you use?
a potting soil.
Okay.
I'm all new at this too, so I'm still learning.
Okay. So when
Yeah.
you have your plant started, right? You got your brand new baby, right?
Uh-huh.
You're taking care of her, you're making sure that she's watered every day. What happens when you transplant your seedlings out into the open is you're giving them a big shock, right? It's like a culture shock. If you were to take yourself and put yourself in a new situation really fast, it can get very overwhelming for you. It's the same thing with plants. So you need to take them from seedlings and take them out a little bit at a time every day, take it outside until it's time to start putting them in the ground, okay? And it's going to help them to get used to the weather outside, to the air outside. And then when you're putting them into the ground, you want to make sure that you're transplanting them at the right time, okay? Making sure that you're putting them in the ground at the right time is perfect. And then also make sure that your soil is prepped for that transplant. So sometimes you want to use a good vegetable food for them, like a miracle grow of some sort. You can use that too as well. That just helps them to go to take that transplant a little bit better. Okay.
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 Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so when you're choosing your varieties, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go over our seed packets now. Your seed catalogs and your seed packets, they're going to give you a little bit of information about what you're going to be growing. They're going to describe the flavor. They're going to describe the appearance. They're going to give you a picture. And they're gonna talk a little bit about the habits, I guess you would say, of each crop. And they're gonna talk about different varieties that do well in your area. But sourcing your seeds or starts from like your local seed company here in our area is what's going to work best for your region. Okay, I know a lot of people talk about Hopi seeds. I know a lot of people that share seeds back and forth with each other. So if somebody you know has a cornfield and they provide a certain type of corn and their corn is doing good in that area, those heirloom seeds would probably do good in your area. From what I hear, the Hopi seeds do really well in our region. They don't take a lot of water. They have been weathered and cultivated in this region for hundreds of years. And so they take really well to what we have in our ground. So those would be my first choice. If you can find good seeds that were already grown and harvested in your areas, those would be your first choice. And then what you buy at the stores, okay? When you're going over your seed packets and you're going over what's viable for you, you want to be able to kind of plan ahead and give that forethought on what you can do, okay? So as you're getting closer to your planting season and you're discovering your different varieties that you think look good, start filling those varieties into your personal planting plans, okay? You can all get free, inexpensive seeds, but when you're getting them free, you don't have much choice about variety, okay? When you're thinking about productions, what kind of soil types that you're gonna need, okay? So like if you're saying asparagus, right? Asparagus is something that you would have to see grow over the course of almost 3 years, all right? You can seed asparagus 1 year, you'll see a couple of sprouts here and there. The next year you'll see them sprout, you'll see them grow about 2 feet tall. And then on the 3rd year, you'll finally have yourself an asparagus. But once you get your asparagus bed going, that asparagus bed will go for about 12 years without having to reseed it, okay? So if you're planning on having asparagus at the end of your first year, it's not going to work that way. Make sure that you have a nice dedicated space to be able to have it for that one crop, okay? So plan ahead, do a little bit of research on them, okay?
We had a little question too about buying seeds specifically from Walmart. Should I purchase a large amount if some of them don't adjust well to the climate and soil?
I always go by the rule of plant double, because something always happens. This year we had prairie dogs, we had hail, we had people stealing the plants. So I always think you can seed twice as much, okay? But then you also want to be able to make sure that you have the space, all right? So you're spacing. You can buy your seeds from Walmart. Just keep in mind what's feasible to you, okay? Some of them, yeah, they don't adjust well to the climate and the soil, but that's all trial and error, okay? And then what you don't plant, you can always give away, or you can always share those with other people, or you can sell them, okay? It's a good place to start thinking about how you can help other people with gardening. This is why gardening with each other and with other people is such a community builder, because that's what we did traditionally. Was we had our fields, we shared our seeds, we helped each other out to harvest, we helped each other plant. So it's a really good community building. That's where your gardening community really starts to come into play. But yes, more is always going to be a little bit better for you. So when you're doing your personal planting plan, you want to take down all the information that you need. And then use your common crop chart if you don't have that information. For example, if your tomatoes need like 80 days before they're ready to harvest, and your first average frost date is only 50 days away, your crop's not going to have enough time to mature before the frost hits. So keep note of when your frost hits. Depending on your region, right now we're starting to get frosts. It's a little bit early in the year, but it's something that wasn't expected. If we were all looking at our weather patterns and we were all looking at our calendars, we already knew that this was going to be a long winter, right? Because of all of the rain. So paying attention to your weather, your climate is something that you're going to start to do naturally after a while. Pay attention to your frost dates. If you want to be planting in the fall time, okay, pay attention to your weather. There are frost dates where they tell you, be ready, cover your crops tonight. Anything under 50 degrees might be a frost night. So you might want to think about starting to cover your plants right about now so that they don't freeze. So your charts and your packages and your catalogs, they're going to list a planting window. Okay, but remember that plants don't read charts, you read charts. Okay, you need to figure out how much time it'll take to germinate. And then when soil is the most moist and the temperature is warm enough. Okay, so seeds are going to germinate, they're going to start to grow when the soil's just the right temperature. Okay, you can invest in a soil thermometer, and a soil thermometer is going to help you determine the best time. Another test you can do is if it's in the springtime, you're going to start to notice new weeds are beginning to grow and the soil is starting to warm up. Out here in our area, you'll start seeing weeds and grass in February, right? You'll start to see those new sprouts of grass growing underneath the snow even. So when you start seeing that, you can start thinking, okay, maybe it's time for me to start thinking about putting my seeds in so I can start them inside. Okay, then pay attention to your frost dates. Your frost dates, especially in this region in Window Rock all the way up to Lukochigay, your frost dates are going to be like the middle of March to the beginning of June. Okay, we have problems with people thinking that in February it's warm enough to start planting their corn, so they take out whole bags of corn into the field and they'll start putting it in the ground in February, and then we get a really bad snowstorm or a frost at the beginning of March, and then they lose their whole crop and all the money that goes with it. So pay attention to your frost dates. It's very important that you pay attention to that, your elevations, and making sure that you have enough time to start them inside before you put them in the ground, okay? Succession planting. Succession planting, it means that you're planting one crop after the other, okay? Like 2 weeks of succession planting means you're planting the same crops at 2-week intervals throughout the growing season. One of the ones that I like to practice succession planting with is radishes, because radishes are delicious. You can think of a radish as a potato and use the radishes the same way you would use a potato. But it only takes 30 days to grow, right? So you can grow 1 row of radishes and you'll have 2 weeks worth of radishes, and they do keep well for up to 2 weeks in the refrigerator. And then I'll plant again another 2 weeks later, another row of radishes, and that'll be another 2 weeks of radishes. So you can do succession planting. There's also a chart within your seed to supper manual where you can start to plan out your succession planting. So this is going to work for plants that grow quickly and they have a wide planting window. Lettuce, beets, carrots, beans, okay? Those are all things that you can do well with succession planting, but that's something that you're going to learn over the course of gardening. I've been gardening for a long time, and there's other people that have been gardening a long time and they're still trying to figure out how to do succession planting, but you'll be able to get it done. as long as you study it every year, okay? So you can actually do 2 or 3 different kinds of crops in succession planting and just kind of replace them with one different crop in the mid-season. It just kind of creates a different crop mid-season, and it increases the variety in there, okay? It allows you to raise more than one crop in the same space in a single year, and it increases the amount and variety of foods in your garden. Okay, now we're going on to crop rotation. So crop rotation, it helps to prevent disease, it helps to prevent pest problems and loss of nutrients from your soil, okay? As you're planting your garden, you want to think about grouping your crops by crop families, okay? And then rotating them into different space every year, okay? You want to avoid planting crops from the same family in the same place 2 years in a row. So when possible, wait 4 or more years before putting a family back in the same spot. So you're going to be rotating it all the time. If you don't have the room to rotate, you need to be able to keep the soil healthy with good gardening practices, making sure you're using compost, making sure that you're using a cover crop, and then choosing disease-resistant plant varieties, okay? So let's say you only have 2 raised beds, have the option of constantly moving them around so that you're keeping your soil healthy. You can always amend your soil by putting more fertilizer in it if it needs it, more compost into it if it needs it. In the fall time, making sure that you're getting it ready for the next spring, okay? Okay, that's fine. So how big should your garden be? That really depends on these questions you need to ask yourself, okay? When, why are you gardening? Are you gardening to feed yourself? Are you gardening to feed your family, your community? And then also, will you be able to afford a garden on your budget? Okay, that garden. Who's gonna do the work? Okay, is the garden going to be a group project? Is it going to be a family project with your kids, with your brothers, your sisters, your grandmas? Or is it just going to be you? Okay. How much time are you going to have to be spending on gardening? You want to be realistic about how much time you and your family are going to be spending in a garden. Okay. And then how much room do you have? Making sure you have access to a large area for gardening doesn't mean that you need to grow a large garden, okay? When I'm thinking about gardening, I think about what I can do and walk to every day, okay? When I'm talking about gardening, I think about going out every day to make sure that my plants are healthy. I'm spending time in there with my plants. I'm getting to know them. I'm making sure that I'm checking to their leaves. I'm making sure that I'm checking the soil every day. I'm making sure that if there are any pests that are there, they're taken care of right away before they start to spread and start to multiply. So you're going to want to pick an area where it's within walking distance, okay? If you're going to be gardening and you're going to put your garden like 3 miles down the road and you work in 8 to 5, you know, you're not going to have the time to be able to develop that relationship with your garden. And, you know, you don't know what's going to happen there. Okay. If you have water that you have to haul every day to your garden, is it really feasible for you to have like a 2-acre garden? If you're hauling water, it's not really feasible for you. And then if you are going to be having your family help you with your garden too as well, it really helps a lot. It really creates that family bonding, and it creates that learning for your children. And it gives you that time you need. We have a garden here at the fairgrounds, and it takes us 2 hours to water it sometimes. And that's watering it thoroughly and making sure that we don't have any to make sure that our leaves are not touching the ground. And it does take some time out of your day, especially if I'm doing classes here with you like this. I need to make sure that I'm planning to go out and just check on it. So it was really nice to have the special diabetes program go in like almost every day and check on it. And then sometimes I would water, and then special diabetes would water. And it was just easier to have somebody to help. Okay. And then why are you gardening? When you're thinking about why you're gardening, are you doing it to feed yourself? Are you doing it to feed your family? Are you doing it to keep food costs down? I don't know if you guys noticed, but the cost of fresh fruits and vegetables is really going up, right? So this is a really good way to make sure that you're getting the right fruits and vegetables you need in your diet to keep you healthy, and then just put it away from winter.
Has anybody tried growing tea plants?
Has anyone tried growing tea plants? Yeah, I have. I would just take off the flowers of the Navajo tea, and just kind of spread them around, and they will take on their own, and grow where they need to. Sometimes they don't germinate, but you know, they grow better in the soil where they're at. So try to find soil similar to the soil that you find the tea plants in. Okay, but you can just take off the flowers on the top and just kind of spread them around here and there. It'll take you a couple of years to find the right spot to be able to do it, but they like to grow wild. Okay, so go ahead into next slide. Your personal planting plan. Okay, so this is you're going to be able to find on page 19. Take some time tonight, look at it. If you have a printer, print it out. You have a pretty good idea now of like the crop you want, the different varieties that you want to plant, what time of the year you need to start planting, and then how many days to harvest, your footprint, and then your planting method too as well. Take some time to Google the plants that you want to plant this coming spring. Okay, if you're going to get complicated right away and you're going to get down to the nitty-gritty and get very scientific as far as your pH balances of your soil and you might overwhelm yourself. So start off small. Okay, start off with maybe 3 or 4 different plants that you know that you're gonna consume. Okay, don't overwhelm yourself. Don't discourage yourself. Start off small and slowly grow your garden every year.
There's a quick question too in the chat about rotating your garden and how that relates to keeping the soil and ground soft.
Yes. So let's say you grow something that takes a lot of nutrients out of the soil. Pumpkins take a lot of your nutrients out of the soil. You might want to not grow pumpkins there the next year because it'll deplete the nutrients out of your soil. Instead, next year you want to move your soil into another section of your garden and plant beans in that section. Okay. So when planting beans in that soil, in that section there, you're actually providing more nutrients into the ground because beans have a lot of nitrogen in them. So I recommend people try to plant beans in certain areas to put nitrates back into the soil rather than compost or any other kinds of soil or any kind of amendments. So it just helping to rotate it, keep your soil soft, make sure it's not depleting, make sure that you're amending throughout the year. And if you're going to do fertilizer, constant tilling is not good. No, constant tilling is really not good for your soil, because if you're constantly tilling your soil, you're breaking it down so much that it starts to become very loose. Once it starts to become very loose, it turns into sand, right? So you don't want to constantly till it. When you come springtime, you're going to notice that you want to turn your soil right away. Don't turn your soil right away. Okay, what happens is when you're turning your soil right away and you're turning it constantly, you're depleting those nutrients and you're moving them around too much. So you only need to move the soil that you need to move for what you want to plant. Okay. We have all of these really big industrial sized tractors now that move all the soil. And what happens to that soil is, it loses that nutrients and it becomes so loose that it just blows away, right? So just move the soil that you need to move to plants. That's it. Yes.
Anna, will you be giving information on companion planting in upcoming meetings?
Yes, we are going to go into a section in your manual. If you look through your manual, I think section 2 will go over companion planting. Yeah, section 2.
There's also one other question in the chat about plants like purple whole peas that come back year after year without reseeding. Do you have information about that?
Well, it depends on what varieties there are. If you can kind of go through and do your own research on those specific varieties, yeah, some of them they're annual, they come back on their own. Kind of like the asparagus. I don't have any information on these purple hull peas, but I'm pretty sure there's enough information on the internet where you can kind of like take notes on it. And if that's something that you want to do, by all means, try it. It might be easier to do. I know that we have an onion variety that seeds itself out. And so they're there all winter long, and they're there in the springtime, and they're there in the fall time. So we have a dedicated section to just our variety of onions. And we don't need to reseed because they reseed themselves. So there's definitely ways you can get that done. Okay, next question or next slide. So choosing your site is what we're going to go into next. Okay, sunlight, your soil, your airflow, your plant care, and something that's convenient for harvest and to avoid problem spots. Okay, so making sure that it has enough sunlight, making sure that you got good soil there, get to know the soil in that area. Make sure it's got good airflow. You don't want to put your plants in between 2 buildings where you're only getting 3 hours of sunlight in between your buildings, and you're trying to grow plants that need 12 hours of sunlight. Okay. Make sure it's convenient for you within walking distance, that you can get to your plants, and you're not traveling long distances for harvest. And then avoid your problem spots too as well. So low-lying areas where it collects a lot of water and floods, you don't want to choose those areas. Okay. So gardening, rule of thumb, you need a minimum of 6 hours of sunlight for all gardens. You want it open, an open site, and you want southern exposure and shade free with a gradual slope. The gradual slope will be able to make sure that when it rains, the water will run off. It won't, not like a large slope, a gradual slope. Okay. If you're doing a large slope, you might be able to lose all of your vegetation in that area, especially during hard rains, if you get hard rains. Okay. So something with a gradual slope, so that way your water is not sitting and it's not rotting your roots. So try to locate your garden away from trees, shrubs, things that can block their sunlight. Gradual slope with sunlight and drainage. Okay, good drainage. This goes back to what I was telling you guys earlier. Your south-facing, your shorter plants, you want them to face more toward the south, and your taller plants more toward the north. You might want to switch it up. If you've got high winds, you might want to put your taller plants on the west side or the direction your wind usually comes from, to create a windbreak. So that's up to you and how you want to plan out your garden. You're going to want to remember that the soil from water actually gets very heavy. Okay, so if you're container gardening, and you're using a 5-gallon bucket and you're watering that like every couple of days, make sure that your deck, your what are those things called? Your deck, your your balconies that can hold the weight. Okay, be careful with that. And then if your garden is like in the drip line of your roof, make sure that it's got good drainage. Okay, when you're putting your garden right on the drip line of your roof, your water is going to come down. It's going to get a lot of that water. That water is going to be very heavy, and it could damage your plants and kill your plants. Okay, not only that, but the drip line it can accumulate a lot of water, and it's right there next to the concrete of your home. And it can create, molds for your house too as well. So make sure you're putting your plants away from your house, not right there and right next to your drip line. Okay. And then with your container gardens, if you're limited by space, grow things vertically upwards on a string to save space. It works well with things that like pole beans, peas. You can even do cucumbers and watermelons and grow them vertically. Do a lot of research on them, figure out what exactly you need as far as the trellis to be able to get that done. So you're going to want to plant all your trellis crops on the north side, corn, tomatoes, and then your shorter vegetables, So you're growing them in a tier by height like that from north to south. Any questions? Oh, and then also some plant varieties, they do need some shade, so you can always grow your shade tolerant plants under your tall plants. Always read your seed packets, okay? Get to know your soil, your drainage soil. Your soil should be loose and well draining, okay? When soil doesn't drain well, it stays wet and cold late into the spring, and it's going to make it hard to grow early season vegetables, okay? Standing water, not good. You're not going to want to grow there. It'll stay wet for a long time, even after the rain and snow is gone. It'll rot your roots. Raised beds they're really good as far as draining, and they also warm better, and you can plant earlier in the springtime with raised beds. But we'll talk a little bit more about raised beds a little bit later. But if you've got weeds, and you've got a lot of weeds, that's a good sign of an area that you want to use to grow. It also shows that your soil is going to be able to support plant life. So the healthier your weeds or your grass is growing on that area is probably a better area for you to think about putting vegetables there. Good airflow. Make sure that it's nice natural breezes. You don't want to put your plants in a really high wind area. And make sure it's convenient, because if you're not seeing your garden every day, you're not going to know what's going on with your garden. Put it where you'll enjoy it, okay? Avoid problem spots. Your flooding areas. This is exactly what happens here. We do have problems here at our garden on the fairgrounds. We have a problem area, but we do have raised beds. So this helps with the drainage problem. And then it also helps to keep water in the ground longer, so we can go longer in between watering periods. Okay, but we still are trying to make sure that we're trying to raise that area so it's not flooding anymore. Let's see, next. Making your planting map is going to be next. You want to map out your planting area. The first thing you want to do is kind of draw a basic sketch of your space. You have all these worksheets in your workbook. The size of your space, the location of your water source. The location of your water source is not something that you think of when you're gardening, okay? If you're gonna put your garden 400 or 500 feet away from your house, you're gonna have to factor in how long of a hose you're gonna need to get there, okay? If you are hauling water, if you're gonna be hauling water from the chapter house to your garden, what kind of buckets are you gonna be using? How big is your water container going to need to be able to water that area. Okay, so how big your garden will be really depends on how much water you can give it. So take note of where your water sources, any existing fences, any existing buildings, your trees, your walkways, anything that you need to work around. If you're going to be digging down into the ground, make sure you take note of where all of your your water lines are, if there's anything underneath the ground that you need to take care of. Sometimes with some buildings, you'll find just rock, like in Yá'át'ééh, the housing area there, their housings are built on pure rock, so there's no way for them to dig down underneath. So getting to know that soil and what you need to do to be able to grow. So in Yá'át'ééh, I would recommend at the housing areas out there to do container gardening or raised beds, okay? Because that soil out there is rock hard, right? Any existing utility lines too as well. We did have a problem where we had a garden that was directly under a utility line and they needed to do work on that utility line, and the NTUA people had to drive through. So take note of those too as well. And then the orientation of your garden is going to be north of your house, south of your house, east of your house, west of your house. Is your house going to be able to provide a windbreak from the wind? Just choose your site carefully. So as you're filling in your map, you think about your plant spacing too as well. You want to think about your walkways too, right? Remember, these plants at maturity, if you don't have the walk space in between your plants, you won't be able to maintain them. You won't be able to check on them. You won't be able to weed underneath them. So take note of your planting spacing, your footprint, your mature plant, your walk space, okay? And that's it for today. Next week, we're going to go over getting started with your healthy soil. We'll go over building your soil, your composting, your fertilizing, and making your garden beds. This is something that we need to start thinking about right now because our trees are going to be dropping these leaves. Once these leaves get on the ground, you're going to want to start getting those ready to compost and getting them into your soil next spring, so you have a nice, dark, nutrient dense soil for your vegetables. And this is the most cost-effective way for you to be able to garden on a budget this coming spring. So the time now is 7:28. Is there any questions?
Thanks, Anna.
Would a recording of this be available?
Let's see. Yeah, we should have the recording available. I would like to get you guys all on a contact list and just get you guys access to the recording. It was supposed to be broadcast live on Facebook Live, but I don't think that it went through because it just, I guess, technical difficulties. I'm not too sure why that it didn't get posted on Facebook Live, but we'll try again next week. And the Navajo Nation Library will have it available to them so that they can post it too as well. So Navajo Nation Library, I guess you guys can post it later. Yeah. And so it'll be made available on the Facebook Live or Navajo Nation Library's Facebook page.
Anna, there's a few more questions that have come in. One is about what type of greenhouse plastic is best for covering plants?
Any kind of plastic is usable as long as it's clear. If you want to invest in in good plastic, I recommend the thicker varieties of plastic sheathing. That way you can roll it up and put it away for the next year. Okay.
The other question is about yellowing leaves on tomato plants. If you're gonna discuss that now or in future meetings.
Well, I would like to see the leaves of the tomatoes. And then it could be just a variety of different reasons why you're getting yellow leaves. It could be that you're not getting enough nutrients to it. It could be that you need to amend the soil to it. It could mean that you might be watering it a little bit more. There's a lot of different diseases that tomato plants are very susceptible to diseases. So it could be a plant disease. But for first and foremost, I would probably look at your watering pattern, making sure that the soil is nicely watered, how compact your soil is. Maybe do a soil testing on your soil to see where your soil needs to be for that specific tomato variety. And then work forward from there. It's just gonna be a trial and error thing until you resolve that.
Can the students get a manual workbook or a hardcover book of this information somewhere?
I would like to make the hard copy available to you. We do have hard copies that are available for free to people. But I would like to see you in this class at least 3 times before the end of the class, okay? And then after everything is done, I'll go ahead and we'll talk to Navajo Nation Library about getting a list together of the people that have participated consistently throughout these 6 classes. And those people would be able to get that manual and pick it up at the Navajo Nation Library here in Window Rock.
Great, thank you for the information.
Thank you, Trevina.
One
Clara,
last one. Did you see that Roma tomato plant leaves are dark and curled up? Fruit was a bit dry. No matter how much I watered, the medium cherry tomatoes and small ones did very good.
I had the same problem with my Roma tomatoes because I had cherry tomatoes, Roma tomatoes, and an orange variety of tomatoes all in the same raised bed. So I had problems with this orange variety of tomato, and I was not able to figure it out because the leaves were looking a little bit dark and they were a little bit curled under. So what I did was I put in a little bit of the plant food and had that go for a little while. What I found out later on was actually a diseased plant, and the disease it started to attack the orange tomatoes with a rot of some sort. I didn't really go into breaking down the remedy for it, but it did produce enough tomatoes off of that one plant by just amending the soil and aerating it just a little.
Can we send any information via mail for people that are off the res?
No, I don't have the resources to be able to do that, to send mail, but if you're in the Window Rock area and you are on the list, we can probably make it available to you for a couple of months. I hope everybody took the pre-course survey.
It looks like both of our surveys have been filled, and I'm going to go ahead and end the polls unless anyone else wants to take them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. I hope you guys had fun. I hope I was informational. This was very informational to you guys. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. If there is any other information that you need for your garden specifically, feel free to go ahead and feel free to go ahead and email me. I'll try to figure out a way to get you the right information that you need, or link you to a master gardener within our area to answer your questions.
Information is the same. It's all the ways. Let's see one.
S file. So you want information off the res. I really can't send it to you in the mail. I don't have the resources for that.
Maybe we probably can.
You
Yeah.
think you can?
Yes.
Well, we'll see what we can do as far as mailing the manuals. But I would like to see you in class, the majority. But I'll see you guys again next Thursday. Any other questions? Okay, time is 7:35. I'm gonna go ahead and end this meeting now. I hope to see you guys all next week, and just welcome to the world of gardening. Those of you guys just starting out this year, it looks like a lot of you are starting out this coming year. Let's get this going. Thank you, Caroline, for posting that link. All right, have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Bye.
Bye, everybody.